Right, welcome back, grade 11s. In this session, we're going to look at the characteristics that are the same as well as the differences for a private and a public company. Now, you'll also know that from our exam guidelines and what is prescribed for grade 11, that they will focus on the benefits and the disadvantages of a company versus other forms of ownership. So it's very important that you know the characteristics of these two forms of ownership really, really well, because you will have to be able to compare it with the other forms of ownership in terms of advantages or benefits for that matter, as well as disadvantages. And we'll focus a little bit more on that in another separate session as well. So let's just look at what are our basic characteristics. First of all, once again, I'm going to start with all the things that are the same. For a private and public company, we know that the owners are called shareholders because people can buy shares in both a private and a public company. One thing that I just want to say before we start is for some reason, there's this misconception under students that a public company is owned by the government. It is not. A public company is not a government entity. We do have state-owned entities or state-owned companies, but that's a separate form of ownership. A public company is a business in which the public, like you and I, your parents, can buy shares through the JSE, the Johannesburg Securities Exchange. So please just remember that a public company has got nothing to do with a government entity or state-owned entity or company. Okay, so as we said, the owners of private as well as public companies are called shareholders. Now, both these forms of ownerships are then legal entities. So that means the business and the owners, or in this case, the shareholders, are separate. So the business can operate on its own. It's seen as a legal person in the eyes of the law. So it can do a business and enter into contracts on its own. Good. As a result of the fact that both a public and a private company have got legal entity or are legal entities, then these companies also have continuity. So once again, the shareholders might change. If I have shares in a public company that's listed on the Johannesburg Securities Exchange, the enterprise will go on. Whether I sell my shares to my neighbor or to somebody else that I don't even know, the business continues as usual. It doesn't have an effect on the continuity of the business. And the same applies to the private companies as well. Shareholders or shares can change hands between shareholders, but the company will still be running and continuing as usual. As a result of the fact that these two forms of ownership are legal entities, the shareholders therefore have limited liability towards the debt of the business. So once again, what I as a shareholder can lose if the business goes bankrupt for whatever reason is only the amount of money I invested into the company, the amount of money I paid for my shares. That's all I can lose. The creditors can't come to my house and take my car or my fridge or my TV. So therefore we say shareholders' liability for the debt of the company or the business are limited to what they've invested in these companies. Then for both private and public companies, it must have at least one shareholder. So there's a minimum of one shareholder, and for both these forms of ownerships, there's no maximum. Right. That's correct. Yes. Then both private and public company, the profits in these enterprises are shared or divided according to the number of shares held in the company. Obviously, the more shares there are, the more the profit has to be divided. But if you have a lot of shares, then you'll also get more profit. Then both these forms of ownership pay company tax. Once again, just like our closed corporations, companies tax at 28% on any profit that the company has made, and then 20% secondary tax on companies, STC, on any dividends that declared to the shareholders. Once again, please, I don't like the term of double taxation. We can rather say company tax as well as secondary tax that's paid on dividends declared. And then both these forms of ownership also have to register with the registrar of companies. That's now all resonating under the CIPC, so the Companies Intellectual Property Commission. Good. Let's have a look at the differences or the different characteristics. If I look at the private company, how do we know it's a private company? Because it ends, the name of the business ends in PTY Ltd. In some cases, it might be displayed on maybe signage and so on, but in most cases, this is also once again applicable to formal documentation like invoices or quotations or important letters that are sent out. There's also registration numbers that will tell you that this company is registered and is abiding by all the rules and regulations according to the Companies Act. Then for a private company, the shares are not sold to the public. So a private company is not listed on the Johannesburg Securities Exchange. How is a private company formed? It's usually a group of friends or business associates or people in the same industry who decide to maybe strengthen their position in the market, and as a result they form a company and then they run this business together. And all the people who start this a company or want to be part of this private company, they buy the shares in this company. So it's not open to the public. They don't advertise the shares. Whoever wants to be part of this private company, they buy the shares in this company. All right. With regards to management, there should be at least one director who is managing or should be managing the private company, and then the documents needed in order to start, or we call it sometimes float a company, private company, are the memorandum of incorporation and the notice of incorporation. And this is normally also the format of these documents you can get from the CIPC when you register your company there. And then quite a nice advantage of a private company over a public company, for example, is the fact that the financial information on profits made and dividends and capital and so on is only available to the shareholders. It's not available to the public. There's no law that tells you, okay, a private company has to declare its financial information to the public. No, because the shareholders is a specific group of people who started this company, this information is privileged only to those shareholders. All right. If we go to the public company, how do we know that it's a public company? Because the name of the business ends in Ltd. The shares in a public company are sold and listed on the Johannesburg Securities Exchange. So that means if there's you want to buy shares in a specific company that's listed on the JSE, if there's shares available, you can become an owner, a part owner of that company by buying shares on the Johannesburg Securities Exchange. So it's the public can buy shares in any public company. Then with regards to management, there should be at least 3 directors, a minimum of 3 directors for a public company. And then the documentation that's needed to start or float a public company, almost the same as with a private company, but because the public can now buy shares in a public company, a prospectus also needs to be drawn up. So once again, a memorandum of incorporation and a notice of incorporation, plus then a prospectus. And remember, we spoke about this. We said a prospectus is basically an advertisement that's drawn up to advertise the company and to sort of motivate people or tell people why they should buy shares in this company. And that is all contained or entailed in your prospectus. And look, I think many years ago it was lots of printed material, and you might still get it today, but I think lots of these things are now happening electronically as opposed to printed media. So, but you have to draw up a prospectus as well. And that also has to be lodged with the CIPC in order for all the criteria to be met to start or float this company. And then one thing that's quite a big difference between a public and a private company is the fact that because you and I, the public, can buy shares in a public company, we need to be able to access that information. So the financial information of a public company needs to be made available to the public. So anybody out there can see or have insight into the financial information of a public company. Just a disadvantage that comes to mind here is the fact that then competitors of this specific business can also see this information, and they can use it again then to strengthen their position in the market with regards to a specific public company. So that, in short, grade 11s are then the differences between a private company and a public company. One thing that I just want to mention, I think it's perhaps still listed as a disadvantage, and you know that I always try and make things as practical as possible and as real life as possible, is the fact that they say it is expensive and difficult to start a company. I think with everything now being grouped under the CIPC, lots of the things are basically done electronically. You can literally, with a few clicks, start a company, more so a private company. There are more things to be looked at and to be handed in with regards to a public company, but it's not like many years ago where it takes forever to even start a public company. So yes, there are rules and regulations that need to be met, but because of technology, it's fairly easy and again much cheaper than a number of years ago to start either a public or a private company. But when they ask for advantages and disadvantages, we obviously also should compare it to the other forms of ownership. But just keep in mind, if you have a time, a few minutes sometime, maybe just go onto the CIPC's website and have a look. I've researched a little bit, and they actually tell you step by step what to do for if you want to start a company one day, public or private. Maybe I'll see you there listed on the JSE in future. Okay, grade 11. So this is our public and private company. What I would like to do in the next session is then to look at and go through our notes a little bit on the benefits or advantages of companies versus other forms of ownership, as well as looking at the disadvantages or the challenges of companies versus other forms of ownership. Right, I hope this helped you a little bit.